Welcome to another episode of Relatively Famous, the podcast where I, Chip White, interview relatives of famous people. Vanna White of Wheel of Fortune is my sister, and that's why I kind of want to do this podcast, because I love finding out what other relatives' lives are like. You know, how do they stand out in the sunlight, or are they still in the shadow? Is it the same as mine, or is it different? So I started this little podcast. Now, we grew up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which is an amazing family-friendly vacation spot. There's 60 miles of coast. There's 90-plus world-class golf courses, 2,000 restaurants, seafood, Italian, Mexican, Greek. If you want it, it's there. There's 30-plus mini golf, Ripley's Aquarium, Broadway at the Beach, House of Blues. So if you want to know more about planning a vacation in Myrtle Beach, go to visitmyrtlebeach.com. That's go to visitmyrtlebeach.com. Visitmyrtlebeach.com. Now, today's guest, I'm super excited to meet. His grandfather is, I love the show that he was in, but he is responsible for child actors actually having money when their career declines or if they decide to get out of the business. Jackie Coogan, for Coogan's Act, was a child. He was actually considered the first child star in silent films with Charlie Chaplin, and he played Uncle Fester in the original Addams Family. That's probably where most of people will know him from. Well, today we get his grandson, who is also an actor, Keith Coogan.
Relatively Famous Podcast with Chip White.
Keith, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you on today.
Oh, I thank you so much. I love your show, the idea. It's fantastic. And Myrtle Beach as well. Beautiful, beautiful.
Oh, you've been?
We could just talk about Myrtle Beach for like 15 minutes.
Well, we won't, but I appreciate that.
Well, I grew up in the poor part of Malibu. And another beach, not the 60 miles you have, but just 26 lovely miles.
Yeah.
With $1 million mansions next to little surf shacks.
Yeah. So, we'll talk about your grandfather a little bit first, and then of course it's going to be a lot about you. But your grandfather was, I'm assuming because even you have benefited from Coogan's Act because you were a child star. Or maybe a teen.
Well,
would be
star is very sweet.
Teen might be the better word, but.
I appreciate that.
How was your relationship with your grandfather? Because I think he was probably in his latter years when you guys were spending time together, right?
Absolutely. I think between the time about 8 years old until he passed, when I was 14, he died in 1984. And my grandparents would spend summers with us. And it was very hot in Palm Springs where he'd retired. And so he, it wasn't helpful in the line reading or, how to act way. He was actually kind of competitive. And which was a relief because by the time I was 6 or 7 and not the world's biggest film child star, the competition was over. He'd won. So it was relaxed. And I was also in that, especially early in the career, that television, you know how theater people looked upon film. Oh, those film people, that's not real acting. And then film people look down to, television people. Oh, that's television. That's not real acting. And now we're streaming Broadway plays and getting great writers and producers and cinematographers and directors, film actor quality and budgets on TV and streamers, and I don't know which. It's one big great form of media and storytelling. We're not locked into sweeps and fall debuts and mid-season replacements. With streamers, they could debut a show anytime. Digital has transformed. My family saw film get invented. They went from Broadway to silence to talkies to color and TV and my grandfather in 84, he'd seen HBO come along, which was, hey, let's cut out the advertisers, just have the consumers give us the money directly. And I got to see it go from the TV, where advertisers gave producers the money, the producers made the product, and you watched it for free with commercials. That's what you paid for it. And then moved into that streaming, which is digital capture, and the distribution has changed Hollywood more than any of the other technologies. The
Oh
Jazz
yeah.
Singer, a drop in the pond compared to what Netflix did, what put Blockbuster out of business. Redbox went out of business.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the funny thing is now half the streaming platforms have commercials, so it kind of went full circle.
And it feels like the consumer is getting a little burned there.
Yeah.
I heard a great thing about the Emmys the other night. They go, well, the networks host them, but it's Stockholm syndrome because they're forced to host and also tell all of their audience members, by the way, the greatest shows are on these streaming services. Go watch them over there.
I know. It's a catch-22. When you were growing up, were your friends enthralled the fact that your grandfather was
No,
Uncle
I grew up.
Fester?
No, God, no, at all. They all had their own famous families. Because the Malibu is a very small community, probably about 14,000 people when I was growing up. And you see everybody at this. Oh, there's Cher. Oh, there's Johnny Carson or David Letterman. Or in my case, one of my neighbors up the street, one of my friends, Jake Busey. So I was always over at Jake's house, which is Teddy Jacketti's house, Gary Busey's house. And that was phenomenal because you see in I don't know if you've experienced this with other people in the business or family of people in the business or families from the business, but we don't we see things differently. There's a different kind of a community, and there's a public and there's a private. And one of my grandfather's piece of advice was you have to learn to live privately in public because we'd see it. Television brought more people see a show in one night than see a movie in a whole box office run. The numbers are phenomenally off the scale. So television stars have, a greater reach, especially if they're on like one of the largest non-sporting event programs that airs nightly. Vanna, between Monday and Friday, 7 and 7:30, between Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, over 90 million people watch those shows. And if you put that into dollar amount for box office, that would be one of the greatest box office hits. And that's every night. It's just a phenomenal number. So television is kind of where the bread and butter is. It's regular work. You don't just go in and mercenary a movie for 3 to 6 months. You could work for 7 years or 10 years or
42 years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it's all different, and it's still all the same basic thing as storytelling or entertainment. And I don't care whether it's a stage or big screen or little screen. I love it. I just love storytelling and being a performer. And in our family, my grandfather, he always would say, be careful of mothers, watch your money. That was kind of the joke, but it was also very true. And as you asked earlier, I was blessed to be able to work under my grandfather's labor law. My mother was the closest watched mother in show business. And gratefully, I got all of my cash. Plus, a mother who was very attentive and knew about the industry through family, because my mother's father was Jack.
Yeah.
So there's no leaving me alone or signing me out to a grip. She's there on the set watching me the whole time. So, yeah, and it's interesting as a child performer and then growing up and adolescent and a young adult. And so I'm 54 now and still have as much fun jumping on a mark as I did when I was 6 years old.
Well, your IMDb's pretty extensive from film and television. I have to say, I went to the theater and saw Babysitter, and I love that movie. The whole Thor thing still sticks out in my head, and like the kid, like,
Yes.
he's Thor, and you're like googly eyed the whole time. And was it Elizabeth Shue? Is that, you know?
Our total crush on her, loved her. She was America's sweetheart at the time. And we're working on kind of an edgy Disney picture since it was under the Touchstone brand. But we couldn't get an R, so they had to watch the words and the language. But we do have a lot of dirty words in the movie. And it was super fun. I don't think it talks down to kids. Chris Columbus is a great director. Adults can enjoy the film. And we were honored with it. Disney Channel did their 100th Disney Channel original movie was Adventures in Babysitting. And I called my agent. I go, hey, can I get a cameo or something? And the agent goes, oh, they're shooting in Canada. They don't have a budget. They're not flying anybody up. Well,
Wait a minute. We're the stars. And then you did another babysitter movie with Chris,
Christina Applegate, love her.
Yeah.
And she's amazing. And look at her strength as she's sharing very publicly her struggle.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing. She's not, she doesn't keep her cards that close to the chest. I don't think she ever did. She always demonstrated her genius level ability as a comedian, as a performer, as a dancer. I was in, Youth and Film Awards where, Corey Feldman would do a number, then Christina Applegate would do a number. And, very, very talented. As just an actor, I felt kind of imposter syndrome because there's other kids that could sing and dance and cry on cue. And I'm like, nah, I just want to sell some Cool Whip.
What, so like I said, your list is long. Funny thing is I saw that you did an episode of Fame, and Jesse Borrego's brother was one of my guests because they're in San Diego, they're in San Antonio here with us, and so I had James Borrego on. And I was like, oh, so what was your your time on Fame like?
Oh, I did an episode ending on a high note with Malcolm Jamal Warner, pre-Cosby Show, and we were kids in a Catholic choir, and as punishment, they had to babysit us, basically. And it was very similar to the two Chips episodes I did as the Brat Patrol stuff, where as punishment, the Chips would have to watch the younger Brat Patrol, junior Chips or something like that. And it was always a sporting event, running, basketball. In Fame, it became basketball again. They're cheap to shoot. It's network television. It provides a structure because you have the training and the thing and the failure and then, winning the big thing at the end. And it was like copycat scripts. It's network television.
Yeah.
And, but fun. John Astin directed an episode of Chips. And Fame was shot. Our episode of Fame was shot. How do I explain this? I did a Chips episode, but in the Chips episode, I was getting bullied in a school. We just shot it on the Fame set. So it was very weird.
Yeah.
When you start working for the producers, if you behave and you're on time and you deliver, you can do one take and nail it. They just hire you. Aaron Spelling, Gary Larson or Glenn A. Larson. What did I have? Suso. There were some directors that picked me early. Bill Blinn, Jerry Thorpe. Oh my God. These guys put me in movies of the week and after school specials and series. At 6, I'm working with method actors, Clu Gulager, Jane Alexander, Jenna Rollins. I don't know my ass from a hole in the ground. I don't know the rating of your show. Sorry.
That's okay.
But if you're talking to a bunch of people that are related to famous people, I can't believe the word ass hadn't come up.
It might have. I can't remember. The funny thing is not funny, but what was it like working with Sean Astin in Toy Soldiers when his dad and your grandfather worked together? Did you guys have stories to relate, or was it just, our parents and grandparents knew each other?
We grew up together because John Astin and Jack were Gomez and Uncle Fester. And I actually visited the set in 1977 of that terrible shot on video Addams Family special. The only cool thing is everyone was still alive. Carolyn Jones and Ted Cassidy. And we remain friends with Lisa Loring and Alec and Felix Sillett all the way to the end. Um, so John is one of the, I think he's the last original cast member. John Aston is still around. We love him. I've chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and attended his Buddhist meetings or prayer, celebrations. We have me and Sean. We would shoot videos with Mackenzie, and we'd be getting ready to go do stunts or something, and Patty would come and go, "What are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Oh, we're gonna go throw Sean out a window. No, Mac out a window, go roll off the roof, and then we're gonna drive with the Cadillac and hit him, and then he's gonna go flying." And she goes, "Okay, just wear your seatbelts." She knows we're using all trick angles and stuff like that. So when Sean was, so Sean's pretty method. So when he was preparing for a role, he got a job as an usher at the band theater chains in Westwood, which just meant free movies for me for a summer. That was great. Very close. Love Sean. He went private to, I went public school my entire schooling. But like Jake, Sean Astin, Jack Black, Gabe, Gabe Jarrett, his father, he's really Gabe Kronsberg. His father was Jeremy Joe Kronsberg, who wrote Every Which Way But Loose, Any Which Way You Can, and directed the Citizen Kane of orangutan movies, Going Ape. So I grew up, like I said, Jake Busey and my friend Gabe, and so none of the other kids cared in school that you're on TV or that your parents or family or whatever on TV. Nobody cared. Yeah.
We had Clint Eastwood's daughter on recently,
Yes.
Kimber, so who happens to work at Wheel of Fortune of all the crazy things, and we didn't even know it until like the other day. Anyway, what is life like for Keith Coogan these days?
Oh, what is the Team of Two on Amazon? Just dropped a few weeks ago. I answer the phone. This is Keith. I'll do it. I try to do at least two things a year in 48 years. That has bared out. You can't really live on that. You get lucky and get a series or, a couple of big movies. That's great. But you got to do something for a living. So since I got a work permit at 5 and my union card at 6, bought a house for my mom at 10. My mom never worked since I was 6. She never worked. Her job was driving me to the set and, keeping an eye on me there. And so thank you, Mom. And my dad's, if, stepdad would watch me, he could be trusted. So growing up was, you go to public school, then you go to your work, and both in public school or working. And the other kids, too, they're so jaded as well. They're like, "Oh, I just booked a pilot. Oh, I don't, I got pinned for something." I'm like, I don't want to hear a child say I got pinned for anything.
Yeah.
Um, they're really savvy. They know where their good side is and their thing. Usually there's a bit of stage parenting where just like a soccer mom or a baseball or a football dad might get angry at the umpire on a bad call. Well, think of dance moms or pageant moms that are sitting there doing the routine while the kid's on stage. That there's a level. I've seen the most terrible stage mothers in the world, and I probably the best. My mother didn't help me with my lines. She said, "He knows what he's doing." She just would get me there on time. We'd go to lunch. She'd watch me, keep an eye on me the whole time, and that was great. That was a great way. We even did like a documentary, Hollywood's Children, and Jack's in it. There is a great shot of me and Jackie walking along the beach. Beautiful little piece. But they asked my mother, they go, "Hey, we want a thing of you like going over Keith's line." And she goes, "Well, I don't do that with him." I go, "What?" "Yeah, we don't read lines with him." And maybe, is there any scene? And maybe we had a scene from Tom Sawyer or something like that. And so we dug out some old sides and pretended to go over them, which was pretty funny. Faking something for a news program or a documentary or reality thing. I guess I learned early that all of it was BS.
Yeah, I've made a lot of them, and it's like, I need you to pretend you're doing this, and what does the script say to do? It. I worked on several reality shows, and there is a lot of staging in those. But hey, I won't.
Yeah, I mean, you need a story. That's fine.
Yeah.
We've produced some reality, and they ain't real.
Yeah. Now, are you still in Malibu? And what?
We still have the place in the Boo, and I'm in Burbank, beautiful downtown Burbank. And at work, so to get back to the work thing, so one of the greatest things about my grandfather, he was the most beautiful little child star, but then also the ugliest monster decades later on a TV show. And my grandmother caught him crying in front of the mirror because he's like, I was so beautiful as a kid. And he's shaving his eyebrows and his head. She goes, Jack, what are you doing? He goes, well, I got the audition for the Fester. And she goes, what are you doing with the shaving? She goes, well, I'm going out for it. I really want it. She goes, Jack, it's an audition. And he goes, I've never auditioned for anything before. So prior to Uncle Fester and Adam Sloan, my grandfather had never auditioned for anything. Which just blew my mind. So he was naive about the audition process, but because of his commitment, he was remembered by a whole. So he told me, it's cyclical, kid. You get your ups, your downs. And he said, you never want to be hot because you can go cold. You just want to be warm. And then you work forever. And he worked until he died. And on the footage of the documentary, there's a great tribute I did on what would have been his 100th year anniversary. I put on our YouTube channel. That has little pieces of that. And as I said, I want to work, just as long as I want to work till I die. So I love this business, and I don't know what kind of parts I'll get later, but it's been fun range from innocent little children to meth cooks.
Now, tell me about your YouTube channel.
Oh, Keith and Pinky's Hollywood Tales. So my wife, Pinky. Hi, Pinky.
Hi.
We shoot, my God, we do 2 question interviews with celebrities. We'll ambush. They don't even know what the questions are. We'll go, do you have time for 2 question interview?
Questions.
Yeah. And the questions are, do you remember the first time you were recognized? And what was the weirdest or strangest fan encounter you've ever had? So we got those. Red carpet stuff, behind the scenes, pictures, travel, Sundance stuff. And fun. It's a little peek into, us kind of running around Hollywood.
You married a fangirl.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, she wants me. I married a fangirl.
Ah, excellent.
Wasn't my fan. No, she didn't know who I was, but she's like, one of her first Fonzie and that kind of pop culture fandom. Get an autograph or, get a selfie. It turns into thousands of selfies with really everybody.
That's awesome.
She's very patient.
Answer the 2 questions you ask everybody. What's your answer?
We have footage of the day we met, and she asked me that.
Yeah, but your answers.
My answers were both bogus. Yeah. Well, I don't know. They were not. The first time, I think it was actually at a function because of context. So it was actually my grandfather and me, and it was some Pioneer Day or thing or something like that with a bunch of B-lists and has-beens. So I went, my mom was, like, hey, he's on this and this. He's been on Chips and Laverne and Shirley, more community. Yeah, he's famous. And he did a little. So here I am. I did get offered a job. Love Boat, the only thing I was offered. So we're there and he's famous. And some kids came over and it was a mob scene. It was like, they were all over me. And that was like the first memory I can remember. But I was probably 7. That track, did I say that before? My wife doesn't love the answer. And then the weirdest was now my wife. No, it was, maybe someone that'll hover, or they don't want to talk to you and they don't approach, but they'll hang out or follow. That's always, a little weird.
Yeah. I used to love walking through the airport with Vanna, especially like in the prime of it, because she walks really fast. And I'm walking with her, and I'm watching the people coming towards her. And as we're doing this, you see the recognition hit, and by the time they turn around, she's gone. And but they're like, that's Vanna, what? It was always so much fun to see that. And I remember going on the book tour with me, like you're saying, it's like the amount of people sometimes was scary that would recognize or come up.
boat tour, like a cruise.
book tour. She
Oh, a
did
book
a
tour.
book tour.
Oh, sure.
You know, back in the '80s and stuff. So,
Wow.
so you got the YouTube channel. You and your wife go to tons of functions and film stuff. What else is life like for Keith Coogan?
Oh, so at 18, I got a job at a video store to work. I love to work. I had 2 movies on the shelf behind me. Really fun job because you get to tell a bunch of famous Malibu residents they're late on their, adult movie. I'm sorry, it was $1.50 and you didn't rewind it. And learn to vacuum and open shop. I've held real jobs the entire time while working, which is the weirdest thing. Because what are you doing here? Like programming for, literally worked for Homeland Security, Port of LA, Cedar Sinai, Kaiser Permanente, and they're like, "Weren't you in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter?" I'm like, "Yeah, totally." I have one birth name that I did 10 years of television under. Oh, I didn't tell you, my mother didn't let me work under my grandfather's name.
Oh, okay.
At first. We're getting my agent. I'm 5 years old and I could read. My mother taught me to read at 3, so I could read really well. And he gives me a page of copy. Don Schwartz on Sunset Boulevard, kid agent. And and I go, got it. What? And it was like a Texaco ad with all this, pretending to be an adult text. And I nailed it. And he goes, God, this is great. I can't wait to get him out there and tell people I got Jackie Coogan's grandson. And my mother goes, no, he's not going to use the Coogan name. He's going to go under Mitchell. Keith Mitchell. And the agent goes, why would you do that to me? And she goes, well, I guess she smelled that nepotism could be dangerous later, like now, the Nepo baby crazy,
Vanna White's
scandal.
Brothers
She
talk
goes, no,
show.
it's nothing worse for an actor than not knowing why they got the part. And that, she wouldn't help me with the lines and didn't let me put my toe in the door with the Coogan name. Now, there's no doubt people knew damn well who I was. Half of them would be like, oh, Jack. And the other half would be go, oh, Jack. So I know that my grandfather, how do you form an ego or a sense of self when you're one of the world's biggest stars at 7 or 8 years old? When you're the youngest self-made millionaire at 8. No inheritance. He earned it all on contract and working. The youngest person to build and own their own building, Jackie Coogan Productions at 8th and Vermont. Stunning. Toured the world. The first celebrity to lend his name to a humanitarian cause. The Near East Relief to help the Armenian, the orphans in the camps. Admission to a Jackie Coogan picture was a can of condensed milk or an article of clothing or shoes. Then he took tons of it overseas. Met popes and Mussolinis and rode on all these ships that sunk, literally made of Orleans, Britannic. I mean, did John Wayne movies, Elvis movies, Frank Sinatra movies. It had stories. He said he did over 1,000 television performances, including like pantomime quiz with the Murder She Wrote. What's her name?
Angela Lansbury.
Yes. We got to meet Angela Lansbury at a Little Women event.
By dropping.
And I dropped his name. I have dropped the name. I'm showing pictures of my grandfather with her. And we got into the little red carpet. And I go, Angela, just, my grandfather. She goes, that was for fun. And she turns to me and she goes, you know why we did those game shows? I said, no, why? She goes, to pay the bills.
That's true. There were a lot of people think just because you've made movies or you're in movies that you make tons of money. I've produced some movies. I've done some shorts. I've acted in some stuff. I've got a podcast that's got a sponsorship now. Trust me, it ain't making me rich at all. It's like at least not coming out of pocket.
No, and that's what brings us to the question of what does Keith Coogan do today? Is I am a tour guide at Sony Studio Tours, formerly MGM Studios, where my grandfather and great-grandfather worked 100 years ago when it became MGM. They had a 2-year contract, 4-picture deal. So, and we have a street named across the street after him, Coogan Circle. And so it has come full circle, 100 years in the business, and working, showing people stages and stuff, but it's not the Keith tour. So I don't necessarily pass every stage and go, oh, that's where I did Chips. That's where
Yeah.
I nearly bankrupted NBC with Super Train in that stage. Oh, this is where we did Joan of Arcade. I stood
Yeah.
with Joe Mantegna on the steps of that fake bank building. And, so it's the funnest business to be a part of. It's the hardest business to not be a part of once you've gotten a taste of it, especially as a performer. And, the 80s and riding in limos and the premieres, and that all happened. I was very lucky with a family and a work ethic. I had a chore list that was ridiculous. And if I did everything, I paid all the bills, all the mortgage, all the gas, everything. I gave no interest loans to my parents for vehicles. And if I did all my chores, which include all the lawn and thing and the vacuuming and the garbage and the dog poop, and then I would get $15 a week. So the understanding the value of a dollar, and I am so glad that kids are protected today by labor laws like the Coogan Act, which is in 5 states. Other states are adopting labor laws that'll protect kids, because there are unboxers. There's an 8-year-old that makes $20 million a year unboxing toys on YouTube.
Isn't that crazy?
What are their work hours? What are their schooling?
Yeah.
Are they putting aside the money they need to put aside? So that's neat that I've had kids come up to me and go, they turned 18 and they got their money, and they told me, they go, thank you. And I'm like, we didn't do nothing. We're actually the family that's famous for not getting their money. And we're very glad that it protected every other kid, in the future.
Yeah. Well, we're getting close to my 30-minute mark here, because I
Oh,
don't, maybe even over. What question did I not ask, or what is something that you really want people to know or share about?
That's just great. I have no idea. Wow. I
Girl soldiers.
Yes. Well, oh, absolutely. So there's a time limit on, Writers Guild America West says that you have about 35 years to re-up the intellectual property rights. Otherwise, they revert back to the original author. That's why you see all the remakes and reboots and streamers and knockoffs. And they're just trying to kind of keep those rights alive. And Toy Soldiers with Sean Astin, Will Wheaton, Lou Gossett, Denham Elliott, Mason Adams. Fantastic cast, directed by Daniel Petrie Jr., whose brother Donald and father Dan Petrie, legends in the industry. I heard Dick Van Dyke's character was named after the Petries. Anyway, Toy Soldiers, well, we need to reboot it with a young, diverse cast. Girl soldiers. We all have daughters. Call Sean Astin's agent. Let's make this right now. We got about a year or 2 left before the rights run out.
All right. Well, hey, maybe the right people listen to this, and you guys will have girl soldiers, because there is,
Exactly.
it's
I work
kind
at
of timely.
Sony. Wait, I work at Sony, which is Columbia Pictures, which is also TriStar, which produced Toy Soldiers.
Yeah.
So, but do you know how inappropriate it is? Even if you're a table away from the head of the company, you can't go, hey, Mr. Vincent Cara, I have this idea.
Yeah.
You can't. That's exactly the thing you can't do. So TriStar, if you're listening, Toy Soldiers, reboot it, Girl Soldiers.
We're going to
sign on
hashtag
right
that on all of our social
Perfect.
media when we get this episode out.
Thank you, babe. That's perfect.
Well, Keith, this has been amazing, and I hate to cut our time short, but it's just that time of night.
Absolutely the best interview, because that's everything that I covered. That I think that, from that kind of fame thing, my mother did this great test. She goes, some people care and some people don't. So she stood in front of the Malibu market and she goes, hi, I'm Jackie Coogan's daughter. And then she marked on a sheet people that cared and people that didn't. And she goes, it's about 50-50.
Well, when Elvis was going to do the 68 special, he was in Steve Bender's office above Sunset Boulevard. And he was talking about, if I go down there, what do you think is going to happen? He thinks it's going to be this mob scene. And Steve's like, I don't think anything will happen. And he said about 30 minutes later, Elvis said, come on. And he got up, left all of the entourage upstairs, said they went down to the street on the sidewalk. And there wasn't a mob scene. Some people, hey, Elvis. But most people didn't care. It was just Hollywood. And there was Elvis, So anyway, appreciate your time, Keith. It really do. I know that
Greatest questions. I thank you guys. This is one of my favorite interviews that we've done, and I really appreciate it. And,
cool.
and thanks for taking the time.
Hey, tell your friends, like, hey, there's this great podcast you need to be on.
So I love that you repeated the website 3 times. That was Timothy Busfield taught me that. He goes, you got to repeat the phone number 3 times. So mine can be found at keithcooganonline.com. That's keithcooganonline.com. That website again, keithcooganonline.com.
Excellent. Well, Keith, thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Take care.
Ya.
See ya.
I want to thank Keith for being a guest tonight. What a fantastic story. What energy and humor. And again, because of his family, child actors have money. And speaking of child actors, if you want to take your kid somewhere fun, how about Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for a fun, family-friendly vacation? If you're having a kid who has autism or sensory sensitive, they are a autism sensory-friendly family beach. They want the beach to be for everybody. Learn more about it when you go to visitmyrtlebeach.com. That's visitmyrtlebeach.com. I want to thank visitmyrtlebeach.com for their support of this podcast. I want to thank Nelco Media for being my partner. I want to thank Nelco Comics for this cool location. It's actually a working comic book shop. Again, I want to thank Keith for his time. I want to thank you, the listener and the viewer, because without you, we would just sit here twiddling our thumbs. Hope you'll tell everybody, like us, comment, share, and let's build this podcast to let's go after Joe Rogan's spot. Anyway, appreciate it. Thank you.
You've been listening to Relatively Famous with Chip White. Please like and subscribe to Relatively Famous with Chip White.